Hello everybody, welcome back to another video in our first unit of EDA. In this video we're going to start talking about pandas, which is perhaps the most important Python library for our class this summer session. And we're going to start by motivating why we would want to use pandas. And looking at this here, I see I've capitalized pandas. I think it's almost always stylized with a lowercase p, so let me change that really quick. But yeah, like I said, let's kind of motivate this discussion. So why pandas? What is it? That kind of thing. So right here, I just have a picture of a sample set of data. So you can imagine we have some items that cost something. We can imagine a certain number of them got sold by the seller, and the seller has some rating here. So the question now becomes, how could we represent this type of data in Python? And eventually we'll see that pandas is the best way to do this. But before we see pandas, let's see two methods that don't work. So in this video, we'll focus on the first method. Quick remark too, so most data files that we see in this class will be CSV files, and this stands for comma-separated values. You could also work with Excel files, but there is a little bit of extra work that goes into it. So typically we recommend converting everything to CSV files first. So, okay. What's the first approach? Well, let's do the pure Python way, and kind of the first thing you might expect to do, how could we represent this data? Well, what if we used a list of lists? So I could do something like, let's say, sample list equals, so I'm going to have an outer list and then kind of list of lists where each list represents a row of this file. So one disadvantage of this method is we're going to lose the column names, but that's kind of not the main thing that goes wrong here. So okay, let's see. First row, we have 1.99, comma 17. Then we have the name Alice, followed by the number 4.9. So that's our first row. Second row, we have 10.45, comma 10, comma Bob, comma 2.5. And last row, we have 19.99, 5, we have the name Eve, and then we have the value of 4.1. So okay, let's evaluate this, and let's see what's it unhappy with here. I think, let's see, it should be like this, sample underscore list. So using just the hyphen, Python thought that I was assigning list. So okay, this is looking good so far, no errors, and maybe motivating this discussion. So let's say I want to answer the following question. So I'm going to say, compute the average in the rating column. So what I want to do here is, again, there's 4.9, 2.5, 4.1. I want to compute this average. So okay, you'd say maybe what's the disadvantage of this method? So I'm going to show you how to do this, but the main disadvantage I want you to keep in mind is that lists of lists are very clunky to deal with. So that's what we're going to see. Up first, let's do a quick refresher of using for loops. So I'm going to create an empty list called ratings. This is going to hold the ratings. And I'm going to say for, let's call this inside list in sample list. So remember basic syntax for a for loop, we use the words for and in. So inside list is going to go through sample list, then we put a colon, and then everything that comes after should be indented if we want it to be evaluated in the for loop. So let's print inside list. Let's also print hello world, and you'll see why I want to do this in just a moment. Oops, and it's saying inside list, I spelled it wrong. So notice what happens here. We enter sample list. This is the first element, so we print that list. Then we print hello world. Then we go to the next list. And then we print hello world again. Finally, we enter sample list one last time, or the for loop one more time, and we get the last element of sample list, and then we print hello world. So the point of this is I wanted to show you the importance of indentation. So notice what happens now if I just slightly change how I indent this. So instead of having print hello world inside of this block, I'm going to bring it out one tab, or really 4 spaces. And notice now it only gets evaluated after we exit the for loop. So okay, quick refresher of for loops, their syntax, and the indentation. Now let's actually answer the question. I want to compute the average in the rating column. So again, I'm going to start by saying ratings. Let's set it to be an empty list. I'll say for inside list in sample list. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take ratings and append. So remember, the rating is the last element of each row. So I'm going to append inside list. And this is a good refresher. To get the last element of a list, I can say -1. So this is going to append the rating to my list called ratings. So now let's take a look at ratings. And we can see here it has 4.9, 2.5, 4.1. And okay, now we just want to take the average. So I can say, let's do the sum of ratings divided by the length of ratings. And we can see here it's saying the average is 3.833335. So kind of in the next video, we'll talk a little bit about precision errors in Python and a few other of these small concepts. But for now, let's just say, okay, this is good. We've computed the average. Again, one thing to notice here, it's just kind of clunky, right? So we have to append, and then we kind of go through each element or each kind of sublist and then append the last element. So maybe it doesn't seem like a huge amount of work, but for a more complicated problem, or maybe I had lists of lists or something like that, or lists of lists of lists, it could easily get very clunky and pretty nasty to read. So I think this is a good place to stop the video. Like I said, in the next video, we'll talk a little bit about precision errors and also how to make copies. And then afterwards, we'll see another approach that doesn't work. See you there.